You walk into a bank 7 months pregnant just to withdraw a few $100s for your baby's crib. But then the teller freezes. Your account is empty. Every penny gone. And the person who took it, your own husband, he's standing right behind you, smirking. But just when your world starts collapsing, the doors swing open, and in walks the man you left years ago, now a billionaire. What happens next will leave you breathless. Betrayal, revenge, redemption, and a love story you never saw coming. Stay till the end, because this isn't just drama. It's about strength, justice, and a woman who refused to disappear. If this story grips your heart, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next twist. Your support keeps these stories alive. The pen slipped from her fingers, clattered against the marble counter, rolled. Claire Sullivan watched it fall, her hand frozen in midair. 7 months pregnant, standing in First National Bank on a Tuesday morning, and she couldn't make her fingers work properly. The teller's face had gone pale 3 seconds ago. Now the woman was backing away from her station, motioning to someone Claire couldn't see. Her other hand went to her belly, protective, instinctive. The baby kicked hard, as if she sensed something wrong. "Mrs. Sullivan?" A man in a gray suit approached, mid-40s, thinning hair, concerned eyes. "I'm Garrett Pierce, the branch manager. Could you step into my office for a moment?" Claire's mouth went dry. "I just need to withdraw $500 for the baby furniture. The crib arrives tomorrow, and they only take cash for delivery." Garrett's expression shifted. Not quite pity, something worse. "Ma'am, there's a problem with your account." Behind her, against the far wall, Derek scrolled through his phone, that smirk playing at the corners of his mouth, the one that used to seem charming, confident. Now it just looked cruel. "What kind of problem?" Claire heard her voice shake, hated herself for it. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "Tell me here." Her hand went to her belly again, 3 times in 2 minutes. She couldn't stop touching it, couldn't stop trying to protect what she'd already failed to protect. Garrett Pierce cleared his throat. "Your account balance is zero. Actually, you're overdrawn by $412. The overdraft fees are mounting." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Too bright, too cold. The air conditioning blasted icy air down her neck. She couldn't breathe. The marble floor tilted beneath her feet. "That's impossible. I deposited my commission check yesterday." $3,200. I watched the numbers change on the screen. "Yes, ma'am. That deposit cleared this morning at 6:15. At 6:47, there was a withdrawal for the full amount plus your existing balance." Claire's vision tunneled, black spots dancing at the edges. "I didn't make any withdrawal." "No, ma'am. Your husband did. He has authorization on the account." She turned, slowly. Derek was still scrolling, still smirking. He knew. He'd known this would happen, had probably been waiting for it, enjoying it. "Derek," he didn't look up. "Yeah, babe? Did you take money out of our account this morning?" Now he looked up, put on his concerned face, the one he practiced. "What? No, why would I do that? We need that money for the baby." Garrett Pierce shifted his weight, uncomfortable. "Sir, our records show you made the withdrawal at our downtown branch at 6:47 this morning." "Oh." Derek's face cleared, smooth, practiced. "Oh, right. Yeah, family emergency. My mom needed surgery. I was going to tell you, babe. Just happened so fast." Claire's pulse hammered in her ears. The baby kicked again, hard enough to hurt. "Your mother died 3 years ago, Derek." The silence stretched. Garrett looked between them. Derek's smile never faltered. "I meant my aunt. She's like a mom to me. You know that." Liar. His mother died 3 years ago. She remembered the funeral, remembered Derek crying. Or had he? Had she ever actually seen tears? Or just his hands covering his face, shoulders shaking on cue? The glass doors at the front of the bank opened. The sound of expensive shoes on marble. Click, click, click. That walk. Confident, purposeful. She knew that walk. She'd know it anywhere. Marcus Blackwell stopped 10 feet away, stared. His eyes went to her belly, then her face, then her belly again. 6 years. 6 years since she'd seen him. Since she'd chosen Derek over him. Since she'd walked away from someday and picked today. The man she'd left behind had been 29, wearing jeans with holes in the knees and a thrift store button-down. Living in that studio apartment with the broken heater, eating ramen 4 nights a week, pouring everything into a tech startup that might never take off. The man standing in front of her now wore a suit that cost more than her car. Custom fit, Italian shoes. A watch that probably cost more than her entire wedding had. His hair was shorter now. Professional. His face had filled out, lost that hungry, desperate edge. Success looked good on Marcus Blackwell. Money looked good on him. The air changed. Derek's smirk faded. Garrett straightened his shoulders. Claire? Marcus's voice was deeper than she remembered, richer. Claire Brennan? She couldn't speak, couldn't move. The baby kicked again, and she gasped. Derek pushed off the wall. We need to go, Claire. Marcus took a step forward. Is everything all right here? Everything's fine, Derek said. Too fast. My wife and I are just leaving. Actually, Garrett interjected, there's still the matter of the overdrawn account. Marcus's jaw tightened. He looked at Derek, really looked at him. And Claire saw something flash across Marcus's face. Recognition, not of Derek specifically, but of his type. The smile, the charm, the casual cruelty barely concealed beneath manufactured concern. Mr. Blackwell, Garrett said nervously, I didn't realize you were coming in today. Your assistant didn't call ahead. Unscheduled. Marcus's eyes never left Claire's face. This is Claire Brennan. She and I have history. Derek grabbed Claire's arm. Too tight. His fingers dug into her skin above her elbow. Like I said, we're leaving. Marcus stepped forward. Is there a problem here? No problem. Derek's grip tightened. Just a misunderstanding about the account. Computer glitch. We'll sort it out. Claire pulled her arm free. It took more strength than it should have. When had Derek gotten so controlling? Or had he always been this way, and she just stopped noticing? She looked Marcus in the eye, saw concern there. Real concern, not the practiced kind Derek wore like a mask. Someone emptied our account, she said. Her voice came out stronger than she felt. All of it. While I was home sleeping, someone took every penny we have. Marcus's jaw tightened. He looked at Derek again. The disgust in his voice was unmistakable. Your husband? Derek laughed, sharp, brittle. Who the hell are you? Someone who cares whether Claire is safe. The words hung in the air, heavy, loaded with 6 years of history, of choices made and roads not taken. Claire's hand went to her belly again. The baby had gone still, too still, as if even she knew something fundamental had just shifted. Claire, may I speak with you privately? Marcus kept his voice level, calm, but his eyes were sharp, taking in everything. The way Derek stood too close, the way Claire's hand trembled, the bruise-like shadows under her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. She's my wife. Derek's voice went hard. Anything you need to say, you can say in front of me. Claire turned to Derek, really looked at him for the first time in months, maybe years. When had she stopped seeing him? When had he become wallpaper in her own life? Yes, she said. The single word cracked something open inside her. The first fissure in a dam about to break. Derek's face flushed red. Claire, yes, I'll speak with him privately. Garrett Pierce cleared his throat. We can use my office. This way, Ms. Brennan. Mrs. Sullivan, Derek corrected, vicious. Ms. Brennan, Claire said. Her maiden name. She hadn't used it in 3 years. Hearing it now felt like breathing after being underwater too long. Garrett led them down a hallway to a corner office, windows overlooking the parking lot, a desk covered in neat stacks of paper, photos of what looked like a wife and 2 teenagers. Normal, safe. Claire sat in the leather chair across from the desk. Marcus took the chair beside her, not behind the desk. Equal footing. She noticed that, noticed everything about him actually, the way he moved, the way he left space between them. Respectful distance. Tell me what happened, Marcus said. Everything. Claire opened her mouth, closed it. Where did she even start? This morning? 3 years ago? 6 years ago when she made the choice that led her here? I don't know what happened, she said finally. I deposited my commission check yesterday, $3,200. I'm a freelance graphic designer. I mostly stopped taking clients after I got pregnant, but this was for an old client who needed rush work. I deposited it at 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon. And this morning? This morning I woke up at 8. Derek was already gone. Said he had an early sales meeting. He's a car salesman. Or he was. I don't know. I don't know anything anymore. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs. Breathed in, out, in. The baby kicked, reminding her she wasn't alone. Reminding her she had to keep it together. I'm not crazy, she said, more to herself than to Marcus. I knew something was wrong. I've known for months. The way he'd changed the subject when I asked about bills. The way collection agencies kept calling and he'd say they were scams. The credit card statements that came with my name on cards I never applied for. Marcus leaned forward. How long has this been happening? I don't know. 6 months? A year? He said he was handling everything. Said I should focus on the baby, not stress about money. That stress was bad for the pregnancy. So I stopped asking. Claire. Marcus's voice was gentle. Careful. I need to ask you something. And I need you to be honest. She looked at him. Really looked. His eyes were still the same. Dark brown, almost black. Kind. The rest of him had changed. Success had polished him, refined him, but his eyes were still the eyes of the man who used to make her laugh in that tiny apartment, who used to talk about his dreams until 3 in the morning, who believed in impossible things and made her believe too. Are you safe with him? The baby kicked, strong, insistent, as if answering for her. I don't know, Claire whispered. I thought I was, but now I don't know anything. Marcus pulled out his phone, typed something, then looked at her again. I'm going to show you something, and it's going to be hard to see, but you need to know the truth. He turned his phone toward her. Bank records, transaction history, her name at the top. Derek's name listed as joint account holder. How did you get this? I'm on the board of this bank. I called Garrett before I came in, asked him to pull your records. He scrolled down. Look at the dates, look at the amounts. She looked, her vision swam. Small amounts at first, $50, $100, starting 11 months ago, then larger, 200, 500, 1,000. The withdrawals got bigger as the months went on, more frequent. This morning, Marcus said, scrolling to the bottom, $23,000. Your entire savings, the inheritance from your grandmother, the money you'd been saving for a decade, gone. Claire couldn't breathe. The leather chair smelled like money, like power, like everything she'd never had. His cologne hadn't changed. Cedar and something clean. Something that reminded her of mornings in that tiny apartment, of being 24 and poor and happy. Show me everything, she said. Her voice didn't sound like her own. Too cold, too controlled. Marcus hesitated. Claire, show me everything. He scrolled, opened other files, credit card statements, her name, her social security number, cards she'd never seen, never signed for, maxed out, every single one. That's not possible. I didn't apply for these. No, but someone forged your signature, and they did a good enough job that the credit card companies approved them. More files, personal loans, defaulted, her name, her credit score plummeting, a second mortgage on their house. I never signed papers for a second mortgage. We talked about refinancing, but I told him no. I said we couldn't afford it. He forged your signature. The words hung there, heavy, final. How much? Claire heard herself ask. Total. How much debt am I in? Marcus met her eyes. $147,000. The number didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. That was more money than she'd make in 5 years. Maybe 10. The way her freelance work had dried up. There's more. How could there be more? How could anything be worse than this? Marcus opened another file. Property records. A condo downtown. River Place Tower. Unit 407, purchased 8 months ago. Claire did the math in her head. 8 months ago, she'd been 4 months pregnant, just starting to show, painting the nursery, picking out names, believing in fairy tales. 2 names on the deed, Derek Sullivan, Stephanie Torres. Who's Stephanie Torres? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. The room tilted. The baby kicked, hard, angry, or maybe scared. Claire couldn't tell the difference anymore. She was supposed to be nesting, washing tiny clothes in gentle detergent, installing the car seat, reading books about breastfeeding and sleep training. Instead, she was sitting in a bank manager's office, learning her life was a lie, learning her husband was a stranger, learning she was broke, impregnant, and alone. Where is he? She stood. The baby shifted, pressing against her ribs, making it hard to breathe. Where's Derek? Claire, wait. Where is he? Marcus stood too, held up his hands. In the lobby. But you can't confront him here. Not like this. You need a plan. You need protection. I need to look him in the eye and ask him why. He'll lie. You know he will. He's been lying for almost a year. He's good at it. The truth of it hit her. Derek was good at lying, excellent at it. That's what she'd mistaken for charm 3 years ago. That easy smile, that quick answer for everything, that way of making her feel like she was the one who was confused, mistaken, overreacting. Let me help you, Marcus said softly. Please, you don't have to do this alone. Why would you help me? The words came out harsh, bitter. I broke your heart. I chose him over you. I chose this. Marcus looked at her for a long moment, and something in his face shifted, softened. You did break my heart, he said, and I got over it, built my company, dated other women, moved on. But Claire, nobody deserves this, and definitely not while carrying a child. The baby kicked again, softer this time, as if she knew, as if she understood that something fundamental had just shifted in her mother's world. Besides, Marcus said, pulling out his phone again, I know things about Derek Sullivan he thinks nobody knows. And I think it's time someone taught him what happens when you underestimate people. Claire walked back into the lobby on legs that didn't feel like her own. Marcus followed 2 steps behind, close enough to catch her if she fell, far enough to let her face this herself. Derek was on his phone, laughing, actually laughing at something on the screen. Not a care in the world, not a thought for his pregnant wife, who just discovered he'd destroyed her life. She walked up to him, calm, too calm, the kind of calm that comes right before a storm breaks. Baby, Derek said, not looking up. I talked to Garrett. It's all a misunderstanding. Computer glitch. They'll fix it by Monday. Really? Claire kept her voice level. A computer glitch that bought a condo downtown? His thumb stopped scrolling. His face went still. Then he smiled. That practiced, easy smile. What are you talking about? Marcus stepped beside Claire. The condo at River Place Tower, Unit 407, purchased February 14th, Valentine's Day. Romantic. You put down $50,000. Where'd you get $50,000, Derek? Derek's eyes darted between them, calculating. Who the hell are you? You know who he is, Claire said. The words came out steady, strong. She felt strong. For the first time in years, she felt like herself again. This is Marcus Blackwell, she continued, the man I dated before you, the one you called a broke dreamer who would never amount to anything, the broke dreamer who's now worth $3.2 billion. Derek's face went red, then white, his jaw clenched. You looking me up? He turned to Marcus. You've been stalking my wife? I'm on the board of this bank, Marcus said calmly. I have access to financial records, and when I saw Claire looking distressed, I made it my business to understand why. She's my wife. This is none of your business. Actually, Claire said, I think my finances, it's my business. And my forged signature is definitely my business. And the $147,000 in fraudulent debt is absolutely my business. People were starting to stare. Other customers, bank employees, Garrett Pierce hovering near his office door, phone in hand, probably already calling someone. We should take this outside, Derek said. His voice had gone cold, hard, the mask slipping. Unless you want everyone knowing our personal business. I'm done protecting your secrets, Claire said. Done pretending everything's fine. Done being small and quiet and convenient. You're being dramatic, hormonal. The pregnancy, don't, the word came out sharp. Final. Don't you dare blame my pregnancy for seeing through your lies. Derek grabbed her arm, the same spot as before. His fingers found the bruises he'd left earlier. Pressed, not hard enough to be obvious, just hard enough to hurt. To remind her he could hurt her more if he wanted to, Marcus moved. Fast. His hand closed around Derek's wrist. Let go of her. Or what? Derek tried to pull free. Couldn't. Marcus held him easily. You'll what? Hit me in front of all these witnesses? No, Marcus said quietly. I'll let them watch me call the police and report domestic violence. Your choice, Anamak. Derek let go, stepped back, put his hands up. I wasn't hurting her. Claire, tell him. Claire looked at her husband and really looked at him. Saw him clearly for maybe the first time ever. The narcissism, the entitlement, the complete lack of remorse. No, she said simply. No what? No, I won't lie for you anymore. No, I won't make excuses. No, I won't pretend you weren't hurting me. You were. You have been. For 3 years. She turned to Marcus. Can you take me somewhere? Anywhere but here? Of course. Derek's face twisted. You can't leave with him. You're my wife. You're carrying my child. Your child? Claire heard her voice break. Hated it. Hated how much power he still had to hurt her on. Is she your child when you're stealing her college fund? Is she your child when you're buying condos for your mistress with money meant for her crib? Is she your child when you're making sure she'll be born into debt and chaos? That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair, Derek, but I'm done. Whatever happens next, I'm done letting you define me. Done letting you make me small. Done trembling in banks while you smirk. She walked toward the door. Marcus followed. Derek called after them, but she didn't turn around, didn't look back. Outside, the sun was too bright, the air too hot. July in the city, humidity pressing down like a weight. Marcus's car was parked in a VIP spot right out front. A black Tesla. Silent, expensive. Everything Derek's used Dodge with the check engine light wasn't. Claire got in, the leather seat molded to her. Heated. Her back pain eased for the first time in weeks. When had she last not hurt? When had discomfort become so normal she stopped noticing? Marcus got in the driver's side, started the car with a button. No key, no rattling engine, just smooth, silent power. Where can I take you? He asked. Your mother's house? A friend's? Claire pulled out her phone. 17 missed calls from Derek. As she watched, another came through. 18, 19, 20. She deleted his contact, blocked the number. It took 3 seconds. 3 seconds to erase 3 years. I don't know, she said. The house is in both our names. Half his mess. Can he lock me out? Marcus pulled over, made a call on the car's speaker system. Vivian Hartley's office, a professional voice answered. This is Marcus Blackwell. I need to speak with Vivian. It's urgent. A pause, then. Mr. Blackwell, I'll put you through. A click, then a woman's voice. Sharp, intelligent. Marcus Blackwell, this is a surprise. I thought you only called me for charity galas and fundraisers. I need a lawyer, the best divorce attorney in the state, someone who handles financial abuse cases. For you? Vivian sounded surprised. I didn't know you were married. Not for me, for Claire Brennan. A longer pause. Claire Brennan, your ex-girlfriend Claire? The one who broke your heart to marry that slimeball car salesman? You remember her? I was her roommate in college. Of course I remember her. And I remember telling her Derek Sullivan was bad news. She didn't listen. Claire closed her eyes. Vivian. She hadn't talked to Vivian in 2 years. Derek said she was toxic. Said she was trying to come between them. So Claire had let the friendship die. Stopped returning calls. Stopped showing up for coffee dates. Added another person to the list of things Derek had taken from her. She's listening, Claire said. And you were right. About everything. Claire, Vivian's voice shifted, gentler. Oh, honey, where are you? I don't know. Marcus is driving. I just found out my husband emptied our bank accounts, forged my signature on $147,000 in debt, and bought a condo for his mistress. I'm 7 months pregnant and broke, and I have no idea what to do next. Meet me at my office, 1520 Westlake Avenue, top floor. I'll text Marcus the address. We're going to fix this. Can you fix this? Claire heard how small her voice sounded, hated it. Honey, I'm the best divorce attorney in the state. I've fixed worse. I once got a client out of a marriage where her husband faked his own death to avoid child support. We found him in Cabo with his secretary. You're pregnant, brokey, and betrayed, but at least your husband is alive and trackable. That's something. Despite everything, Claire almost smiled. Almost. There's one thing, Vivian said, her voice going serious. How far along did you say you were? 7 months, due December 8th. We need to move fast. If you're still married when the baby's born, Derek has automatic parental rights. Even if he's in jail, even if he forged your signature on 100 documents. The law assumes marriage equals paternity. The words hit like a physical blow. Claire put her hand on her belly. The baby kicked, strong, insistent. No, Claire said, he doesn't get to be a father. He doesn't get to teach her how to lie, how to steal, how to destroy people. Then we filed today. Nevada allows same-day divorce filing with proof of residency. Marcus, you still have that house in Henderson? I do. Perfect. Claire can establish residency there. File in Nevada. We'll argue financial abuse, fraud, and risk to the unborn child. It's legally gray but defensible. And more importantly, it's fast. I can't move to Nevada, Claire said. I'm 7 months pregnant. My doctor is here. My life is here. What life I have left? It's temporary, Vivian said. Long enough to establish residency and file. A few weeks, maybe a month. Then you can come back and we'll handle everything else from here. Marcus looked at Claire. It's your choice. I'm offering a solution, not forcing one. You can stay. Fight it out here, but it'll take longer, and the baby will be born before the divorce is final. Claire closed her eyes, saw her daughter's face on the ultrasound. Those tiny fingers curling and uncurling. That perfect profile. She deserved better than Derek Sullivan. Better than a father who stole from her before she was even born. Okay, Claire said. Nevada, let's do it. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her. Is this Claire Sullivan? A woman's voice. Young, uncertain. This is Stephanie Torres. I think we need to talk about Derek. Claire's hand tightened on the phone. You're the woman he bought a condo for. Before you hang up, Stephanie rushed the words. I didn't know he was married. Not at first. When did you find out? 3 months ago, I was cleaning his car. Found a sonogram photo. Your name on it. The baby's heartbeat measurements. I confronted him. Claire remembered that day. 3 months ago. Derek had come home late, angry, said a customer had complained about him, said his boss was on his case. She'd made him dinner, rubbed his shoulders, tried to make it better. While he'd been with Stephanie, while his mistress was discovering his pregnant wife existed. What did he tell you? Claire asked. That you were separated, getting divorced, that the baby was a mistake, an attempt to trap him. The words landed like punches, each one finding a soft spot, a vulnerable place. He said you were mentally unstable, Stephanie continued, that you'd maxed out credit cards and blamed him for it, that he was protecting his credit by keeping separate accounts. I believed him, Claire. I'm so sorry, I believed every word. Marcus pulled into the parking lot of a tall building downtown. Parked, waited, giving Claire space to have this conversation. Why are you calling me now? Claire asked. Because this morning he withdrew $60,000 from our joint account. The condo, I bought it, my down payment, my savings, my credit. He said his was bad because of you, because of your spending. So I put everything in my name. And this morning he took $30,000 from our joint account and disappeared. $30,000? The bank said he withdrew $23,000 from our account. plus 30 from ours. That's 53,000 in Tish. Claire, where is he? I don't know. I haven't seen him since the bank. Claire looked at Marcus. Do you know where he'd go? Marcus was already typing on his phone. I have some resources. Let me make some calls. I have his location, Stephanie said. On his phone. He thinks I don't know how to check it, but I do. He's at the airport. McCarran, Terminal 3, flight to Cancun boards in 90 minutes. Marcus grabbed his phone, made a call. This is Marcus Blackwell. I need to speak with customs at McCarran Airport. Yes, I'll hold. He put his hand over the phone. What's Derek's full name? Derek James Sullivan, Claire said. And does he have any criminal record? Not that I know of. Marcus went back to his call. Derek James Sullivan, attempting to board a flight to Cancun with approximately $50,000 in cash. Yes, I believe it's connected to fraud and identity theft. My attorney will be contacting the district attorney's office within the hour with formal charges. He listened, nodded. Thank you, I appreciate your cooperation. He hung up, looked at Claire. They'll detain him, hold him for questioning. Vivian will have time to file charges. Claire's phone was still on speaker. Stephanie's voice came through, small and shocked. You got him arrested? He stole from both of us, Claire said, from his pregnant wife and his mistress. What did you think would happen? I don't know. I don't know what I thought. Were there signs? Claire asked. The question surprised her, but she needed to know, needed to understand if she'd been uniquely blind or if Derek was just that good at deception. Stephanie was quiet for a moment. Yes, the way he talked about his ex-wife, how it was always her fault, never his, the way he'd cancel plans at the last minute, always an emergency, always someone else needing him, the way he never let me meet his friends, said they wouldn't understand our love. Claire laughed, sharp, bitter. He told me you wouldn't understand our financial struggles. That's why I couldn't tell anyone about the debt, because they wouldn't understand. He isolated us, Stephanie said, both of us, made us feel like we couldn't trust anyone but him. Narcissistic abuse, Vivian's voice came through Marcus's phone. They'd never hung up. She'd been listening. Classic pattern, isolate, create dependence, gaslight, then exploit. I'm sorry, Stephanie said. For my part in this, I should have looked harder, should have questioned more. You were a victim too, Claire said. The words surprised her, but they were true. Stephanie had been lied to, manipulated, used, just like Claire. Will you testify? Vivian asked. If we press charges, we'll need your statement, both of you. Yes, Stephanie said immediately. Yes, Claire echoed. Good, ladies, I'll be in touch. Claire, get up here, we have work to do. Marcus ended the call, looked at Claire. Ready? No, but let's do it anyway. They rode the elevator to the top floor in silence. Claire watched the numbers climb. 10, 20, 30, 40th floor. Vivian's office took up half of it. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Expensive art on the walls. A receptionist who looked like she could crush your soul with a lifted eyebrow. Ms. Brennan and Mr. Blackwell for Ms. Hartley, Marcus said. The receptionist's expression softened. She's expecting you. Go right in. Vivian's office was all glass and steel and power, and Vivian herself was exactly how Claire remembered. Tall, black, beautiful, sharp eyes that missed nothing. She wore a navy suit that probably cost more than Claire's wedding dress had. She came around her desk, hugged Claire. Hard. I wanted to be wrong about him, Vivian said. I prayed I was wrong. Claire hugged her back, started crying, finally cried, all the fear and anger and betrayal pouring out in Vivian's expensive office on the 40th floor. I'm sorry, Claire managed, for disappearing, for not listening, for everything. Hush, you're here now, that's what matters. Vivian pulled back, handed Claire a box of tissues. Now, let's destroy the man who hurt my friend. They sat. Marcus showed Vivian everything on his phone, the bank records, the credit cards, the forged signatures, the condo, all of it. Vivian took notes. Her expression got darker with each new piece of evidence. This isn't just divorce, she said finally. This is fraud, identity theft, forgery, wire fraud. He's committed multiple felonies. Can I get the money back? Claire asked. Some of it, maybe. The inheritance will be harder because he had legal access to the account. But the credit cards? The loans? Those signatures are forged. We can prove it. Get those discharged. Your credit will recover. How long will it take? Months, maybe a year. But Claire, you're looking at this wrong. This isn't about money. This is about freedom. This is about making sure that baby girl you're carrying doesn't grow up with a father who taught her that love means exploitation. Claire put her hand on her belly. The baby kicked, like she agreed. Then let's do it. Whatever it takes, let's make sure he never hurts anyone again. Marcus drove Claire to her mother's house, a small ranch in the suburbs. The same house Claire had grown up in, the same creaky porch, the same mailbox with the fading numbers. Ruth Brennan opened the door before they reached it. 58 years old, retired nurse, silver hair in a practical bob, lines around her eyes from too many night shifts and not enough sleep. She took one look at Claire's face and knew. Come inside, baby. Claire walked into the kitchen where she'd eaten breakfast for 18 years, sat at the table where she'd done homework, where she'd opened her college acceptance letter, where she'd told her mother she was marrying Derek despite Ruth's quiet concerns. The chair creaked. It had always creaked. The table wobbled, still needed that folded napkin under one leg. The clock above the sink tick, tick, ticked. Same clock from childhood. Nothing had changed except everything. Ruth poured tea, put out cookies, the kind from the blue tin that appeared at every holiday. Normal things, comforting things. Tell me, Ruth said simply. So Claire did. All of it. The bank, the debt, the mistress, the condo, Derek at the airport trying to flee to Cancun. All of it. Ruth listened, didn't interrupt, didn't say I told you so. When Claire finished, Ruth reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. I kept your room, Ruth said. Your things, in case you ever needed to come home. Something broke inside Claire. Some last piece of pride or stubbornness or fear. She started crying again. Deep, wrenching sobs that made her whole body shake. Ruth came around the table, held her daughter, stroked her hair, hummed the same song from childhood. You are my sunshine. Claire's grandmother had sung it. Her mother sang it. Now Claire put her hand on her belly and hummed too, teaching it to her daughter. 4 generations of women. 4 generations of surviving difficult men. Claire's phone buzzed. Text from Vivian. Derek detained at airport, trying to board with $63,000 cash. Customs flagged. DA's office called. They're interested. Very interested. Multiple felonies. This is good, Claire. This is very good. Another text. Marcus. Whatever you decide, I'm here. Not as a savior, not as the one who got away, as someone who remembers who you were before him and wants to help you find her again. Claire looked at the texts, at her mother's kitchen, at the life she'd run for 6 years ago because it felt too small, too ordinary, not exciting enough. She'd chosen excitement, chosen charm, chosen the man who made grand promises and delivered pretty lies. And where had it gotten her? Broke, pregnant, sitting in her childhood kitchen while her mother made tea and sang old songs. But she was safe. That was something. She was safe and her baby was safe. And for the first time in 3 years, she could breathe without wondering what fresh disaster tomorrow would bring. Mom, Claire said, can I stay here? Just for a while, until I figure things out. Baby, this is your home, always has been, always will be. That night, Claire lay in her childhood bed, a twin bed, too small now, especially pregnant. Her feet hung off the end. The baby stretched, running out of room in the womb the same way Claire ran out of room in the bed. The walls were still pink. The color she'd painted them at 13 glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, college textbooks on the shelves. Everything frozen in time, waiting for her to come back. She talked to her daughter, first time she'd done it out loud. Hey, baby girl, it's Mom. Your mom. I'm supposed to have everything figured out. Supposed to have a nursery ready, a safe home, a father who loves you. Instead, I have this. A twin bed in my childhood room, a husband in custody, an ex-boyfriend paying my legal bills. This isn't how I planned it. This isn't the story I wanted to tell you. The baby kicked, strong, insistent. But maybe that's okay. Maybe the best stories aren't the planned ones. Maybe the best mothers are the ones who fight, who survive, who show their daughters what strength really looks like. Your father doesn't get to define us. My mistakes don't get to limit you. We're going to be okay. I don't know how yet, but we will. She put both hands on her belly, felt her daughter move beneath them, active, unaware of the chaos swirling around her. I chose wrong, Claire whispered. I picked charm over character, flash over foundation. But that doesn't make me stupid. It makes me human. And being human means getting another chance. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Vivian. Derek being charged. Wire fraud, identity theft, forgery, multiple counts. He'll be in custody at least 72 hours. File for divorce now. Emergency motion. We move fast. Strike while he can't fight back. Claire read the message 3 times. Felt something shift inside her. Not quite hope, but something close to it. The first stirrings of possibility. She texted back, "Do it. File everything. I want this over before she's born." Vivian's response came immediately. "That's my girl. Welcome back, Claire. I've missed you." Claire fell asleep with her phone in her hand, her daughter kicking beneath her palm, and her mother's voice still humming in her head. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray." Tomorrow she'd face reality. Tomorrow she'd start rebuilding. Tonight she was safe. That was enough. 3 days later, Claire went back to her house. Not home. It hadn't been home in a long time. Maybe never. Just the place where she'd been slowly erased. Marcus drove her, waited in the car, engine running, ready to leave the moment she needed to. "Take your time," he said. "I'll be right here." The key still fit. The door still creaked. But everything looked different. Like she was seeing it for the first time. Or seeing it clearly for the first time. The couch Derek had insisted they buy. Fake leather already peeling. The TV mounted on the wall. 70 inches. Top of the line 2 years ago. Now outdated. Derek always needed the newest thing. The shiniest toy. The photos on the wall stopped her cold. 23 pictures, she counted. All of Derek. Derek golfing. Derek with his work buddies. Derek at a car show. Derek. Where were the pictures of her? Of them together? Of their wedding day? She found them in the garage, in a cardboard box marked Claire's stuff. 47 photographs. Her art from college. Her friends, her mother, her life before Derek. Put away. Out of sight. Like she'd never existed. The junk drawer in the kitchen held more evidence. A receipt from February 14th. Condo furniture. $8,000. While she was home painting the nursery, choosing between pale yellow and mint green, he was buying furniture for Stephanie, nesting with his mistress while his wife nested alone. Claire moved through the house systematically, opened drawers, closets, looking for what she didn't know. Maybe proof, maybe closure, maybe just permission to feel the rage building in her chest. She found Derek's laptop in his home office. The password was still the same. His mother's birthday. He'd never changed it. Too arrogant to think anyone would look. Too confident in his control. She opened his email, saw messages to Stephanie, hundreds of them, going back 18 months. "Can't wait to see you tonight, baby. Told C I have a sales conference. The pregnancy is such a drag. She's so needy lately. You're the only good thing in my life. Once the divorce is final, we can be together for real. No more hiding, just you and me and our life in Cancun." Cancun. He'd been planning to leave all along. Take the money, take Stephanie, leave Claire broke and pregnant and alone. That had been the plan, the end game. She kept reading, found emails to offshore accounts, wire transfer confirmations. He'd been moving money for months, small amounts. Enough to add up, but not enough to trigger alerts. $50,000 sitting in an account in the Cayman Islands. Money he'd stolen, money he'd hidden, money he thought no one would find. Claire took screenshots, sent them to Vivian. To Marcus, evidence, ammunition, the tools she'd need to destroy him the way he'd tried to destroy her. Then she packed her clothes, her books, her grandmother's jewelry box, the sonogram photos from the refrigerator, her art supplies from the closet, everything that was hers. She left his stuff, all of it. Let the house stand as a museum to his narcissism. Let the bank foreclose. Let it all burn down. She didn't care anymore. In the nursery, she stopped. The room she'd painted pale yellow. The crib they had ordered together, that she'd paid for with her commission check, that would never be delivered because the account was empty. The mobile with the little elephants, the changing table her mother had helped her pick out. She took the mobile, left the rest. Her daughter would have a nursery, just not here, not in this house of lies. Marcus helped her load everything into his car, didn't ask questions, didn't offer unwanted comfort, just helped her pack and didn't comment when she came out carrying trash bags full of her life. That's everything, he asked. That's everything that matters. They drove back to her mother's house. Ruth had spent the past 3 days transforming Claire's childhood bedroom into a nursery. Pale yellow paint, the same color Claire had chosen for the other house. A bassinet borrowed from a neighbor. A changing table from the thrift store, refinished and sturdy. "Mom," Claire said, throat tight, "you didn't have to." "Yes, I did. That baby girl needs a nursery, and you need to know you have a home, not his house. Home." Claire and Ruth painted together, rolling yellow paint over pink walls, covering up the past, creating space for the future. They didn't talk much, didn't need to. The rhythm was meditative, soothing, up, down, covering old mistakes with new possibilities. Marcus showed up around 6 with Thai food. Claire's favorite, he remembered. Green curry and spring rolls and mango sticky rice. They ate on the back porch. Paper plates and plastic forks. The 3 of them. Claire's phone rang twice. She ignored it both times. Derek's lawyer, probably. Or Derek himself from jail. She didn't care. "The charges are solid," Marcus said between bites. "The DA is prosecuting wire fraud, identity theft, forgery, and now with the offshore accounts, money laundering. He's looking at serious time." "How serious?" 7 to 10 years, maybe more if they stack the charges. Claire sat with that information. Derek in prison, Derek unable to hurt anyone else, Derek finally facing consequences. "What about the debt?" she asked. "The 147,000? Most of it will be discharged, proven fraud. The credit card companies will eat the cost. The loans will be forgiven. The second mortgage will be voided because the signature was forged. Your credit will take a hit, but it'll recover. You're not liable for his crimes." "And the inheritance? My grandmother's money?" Marcus looked uncomfortable. "That's harder. He had legal access to that account. Joint account, joint ownership. The law assumes you authorized the withdrawal. But I didn't. I know, but proving that is difficult. We can try. Vivian's working on it. But Claire, you need to prepare for the possibility that money is gone. $23,000, a decade of saving. Her grandmother's legacy. Gone to fund Derek's escape plan." "Okay," Claire said. The word came out steadier than she felt. "Okay, so I start over. At 30, 7 months pregnant, with no savings and ruined credit, but free. That's something." "That's everything," Ruth said softly. Marcus set down his fork, looked at Claire with those dark eyes that still saw too much. "Why are you doing this?" Claire asked. The question had been building for days. "Really, it's not just old friendship. It's not just being nice. So why buy?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. The sun setting behind him painted the sky orange and pink. Beautiful. Like the world hadn't just turned upside down. "Because when you left," he said finally, "I was angry. For years. Built my company on that anger. Every success was a see what you missed moment. Every milestone was proof I was worth waiting for. I dated beautiful women, successful women. None of them were you." He paused, took a breath. Then about 2 years ago, I let it go, went to therapy, dealt with my ego. Realized you didn't leave because I wasn't enough. You left because we wanted different timelines. That's not betrayal, that's incompatibility. I forgave you, forgave myself, moved on for real, not just in theory. So when I saw you in that bank, pregnant, trembling, with a man who smiled while you suffered, I didn't see my ex-girlfriend. I saw a woman in crisis, a woman who deserved help, and I'm finally successful enough to give it. Claire felt tears prick her eyes. And that's all? That's not all, Marcus admitted. Seeing you reminded me of who I was before the money, before the success. You knew me when I lived in that apartment with the broken heater, when I ate 79-cent burritos for dinner, when I had a dream but no proof it would work. You believed in me then, even if you couldn't wait for then to become now. So no, it's not charity, it's reciprocity. You invested in me when I had nothing. I'm investing in you when you need everything. I'm not a charity case, Claire said, but the words came out soft, not defensive, just true. I know you're a woman who made one bad choice in men. Doesn't define you, doesn't limit you. And it sure as hell doesn't mean you're not worth fighting for. Ruth brought out pastille, apple homemade. They sat on the porch eating pie and drinking decaf coffee and watching the sun set. Not talking about Derek or divorce or debt, just being. Vivian called around 9. Divorce papers filed in Nevada. Emergency jurisdiction granted based on domestic financial abuse and risk to unborn child. Derek's attorney is scrambling. They didn't expect us to move this fast. And Claire? Stephanie Torres is willing to testify. She's documenting everything, every lie he told her, every manipulation. She wants to make sure he never does this to anyone else. Thank her for me, Claire said. Thank her yourself. She wants to meet. Says you're the only person who understands what she went through. Claire thought about that. The mistress and the wife, connected by betrayal, united by survival. Okay, tell her I'll meet her. That night, Ruth brought out more pie. The four of them sat around the porch table. Claire, Ruth, Marcus, and Vivian, who'd driven over to deliver papers in person. So Derek's in custody, Vivian said, ticking off points on her fingers. Broke. About to be federally prosecuted. Stephanie's suing him. The banks flagged him for fraud. His credits destroyed. His reputation's obliterated. And his pregnant wife just filed for divorce from another state with one of the best legal teams in the country. Good, Ruth said simply. Marcus laughed. Claire laughed. Even Vivian cracked a smile. For 5 minutes, it wasn't about Derek. It wasn't about divorce or debt or betrayal. It was about pie and porch light and the first real breath Claire had taken in 3 years. It was about women supporting women. About mothers and daughters and friends who don't give up. About the quiet strength that comes from surviving impossible things. It was about hope. Finally, after so long in the dark, a glimmer of light. 3 weeks later, Claire sat in a courtroom in Nevada, 8 months pregnant now, the baby pressing against her ribs, making it hard to breathe, making it hard to think about anything except this final step toward freedom. Vivian sat beside her, wearing another power suit, navy again, her lucky color, she'd said, lucky for destroying narcissistic abusers. Across the aisle, Derek sat with his public defender, orange jumpsuit, handcuffs, defeated. He looked smaller somehow, like exposure had shrunk him. Or maybe he'd always been this small, and Claire just hadn't been able to see it through the smoke and mirrors of his charm. He looked at her, tried the smile, the one that used to work, that used to make her doubt herself, question her reality, accept his version of events. She looked through him, past him, like he was glass, like he didn't exist. The judge reviewed the case. A woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and zero patience for nonsense. She'd seen the evidence, all of it. The forged signatures, the stolen money, the offshore accounts, the mistress, the laws, everything. The evidence is overwhelming, the judge said. Her voice carried the weight of years on the bench, years of seeing the worst of humanity. Mr. Sullivan, you have systematically defrauded your wife, forged her signature on multiple documents, stolen her inheritance, placed her in debt she did not incur, and plan to abandon her while pregnant with your child. Derek opened his mouth. His lawyer put a hand on his arm. Shut him up. Divorce granted, the judge continued. Full custody to Ms. Brennan pending birth. Mr. Sullivan's parental rights suspended pending criminal trial. Restitution ordered in the amount of $67,000 on to be recovered from various accounts, including offshore holdings. Mr. Sullivan, you will have no contact with Ms. Brennan or the child. Violation will result in immediate arrest. It was over in 12 minutes. 3 years of marriage, a lifetime of betrayal, ended in 12 minutes. Outside the courthouse, Derek's public defender caught Claire's arm. Young, overworked, doing his job but clearly not enjoying it. My client wants to speak with you. No. He says he's sorry, says he made mistakes, says he wants to be in his child's life. Claire stopped, turned, looked at the lawyer with his tired eyes and cheap suit and stack of hopeless cases. Tell your client that sorry doesn't empty bank accounts. Sorry doesn't forge signatures. Sorry doesn't buy a condo for a mistress while your wife is pregnant. Sorry doesn't fix anything. The lawyer started to speak. Claire held up her hand. Tell your client that he taught me something valuable, though. He taught me that my worst mistake wasn't leaving a good man for a bad one. My worst mistake was thinking I needed a man at all. Tell your client that his daughter will grow up knowing her mother's strength. She won't know his name, won't hear his excuses, won't inherit his entitlement. Tell your client that I'm done trembling, done apologizing for taking up space, done making myself smaller so insecure men can feel bigger. And tell your client that the next time he empties someone's bank account, he should make sure she doesn't have a billionaire ex-boyfriend willing to hire the best attorneys in the state. She walked away, didn't look back. Marcus was waiting by his car, smiling. Badass, he said. I'm learning. They flew back to Seattle that afternoon, first class. Claire had never flown first class before. The seats were huge. The flight attendants brought warm towels and real food. Marcus worked on his laptop, gave her space to process, to breathe, to feel. At 30,000 feet, Claire put her hand on her belly, felt her daughter move, strong, active, unaware that she'd just been freed from a father who would have taught her all the wrong things. Thank you, Claire said. Marcus looked up from his laptop. For everything, for seeing me in that bank, for not walking away, for helping me remember who I was. You did the hard part, Marcus said. I just provided resources. You provided the courage. Still, thank you. 2 months later, on a cold December morning, Claire went into labor. Ruth held one hand, Vivian held the other. They'd both been staying at Ruth's house, helping, supporting, building a village for the baby who would need one. Marcus was in the waiting room. He'd brought flowers, pink roses, stayed back, respectful, giving them space. But there, present, a constant, steady presence through all of this. Georgia Ruth Brennan was born at 3:47 in the afternoon. 7 pounds, 9 ounces. Perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes. A full head of dark hair and her mother's nose. Claire held her daughter for the first time and felt everything shift. All the fear, all the anger, all the betrayal, it didn't disappear, but it got smaller, made room for something bigger. Love, hope, possibility. Hey, baby girl, Claire whispered. Welcome, your mom's a mess, but a strong mess. We're going to figure this out together. Just us. Well, us and Grandma Ruth and Aunt Vivian and a weird honorary uncle named Marcus who used to date your mom before you were a concept. George's eyes open, dark blue, alert, aware. You're going to hear stories someday about your father, about mistakes, about banks and betrayal and me trembling. But you'll also hear about what came after, about getting up, about fighting back, about building something better from the ruins. That's your inheritance, Georgia, not money, not safety, strength, the kind that gets tested and doesn't break. Ruth cried, happy tears this time. Vivian took pictures, documented this moment, this beginning. Marcus came in later, held Georgia while Claire slept. When Claire woke up, she found him in the rocking chair, her daughter asleep on his chest, his hand curved protectively around her tiny back. She's beautiful, he said softly, just like her mother. Thank you, Claire said, for holding her daughter, for being there, for all of it. Derek tried to call from jail. Claire blocked the number. Stephanie sent flowers, white roses, a card that said simply, "For the women who refuse to disappear, thank you for fighting. It gave me courage to fight too." The DA added Stephanie's case to Derek's charges. Pattern of financial abuse. Fraud across multiple victims. The sentence went from 7 years to 12. With parole, he'd serve at least 8. 8 years. Georgia would be 8 years old before her father got out. Old enough to understand. Old enough to know her mother had protected her. Old enough to see strength instead of absence. 6 months after Georgia's birth, Claire moved into her own apartment. Small, affordable, hers. The apartment smelled like baby powder and paint. Georgia slept in a bassinet by the window, sunlight streaming through cheap blinds, the sound of traffic below. City life, real life. Not the suburban prison Derek had built for her. Claire painted again. For the first time in 3 years. Abstract pieces. Bold, angry, beautiful. Raw emotion on canvas. Everything she'd been too afraid to feel when Derek was controlling her reality. Marcus visited on Saturday afternoons, brought coffee, held Georgia while Claire finished sections. They developed a friendship, real friendship, based on mutual respect instead of romance or history or what might have been. "You're really good," Marcus said, studying her latest piece. Reds and blacks and gold. Violence and beauty. Destruction and creation. "I forgot," Claire admitted. "Derek said art was a hobby, said I needed to be realistic, get a real job, contribute. Derek was an idiot." "Well, yes." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, "I have a proposition. My company headquarters needs art. Big walls, local artists. Interested?" Claire turned, suspicious. "Is this pity?" "It's business. I've bought 3 of your paintings already, under an LLC so you wouldn't know. They're in my office. People ask about them constantly, where they're from, who made them. You're talented, Claire. You always were. I'm just offering a platform. You still have to do the work." Claire looked at her paintings, really looked. They were good, raw, honest. The kind of art that makes people uncomfortable because it's too real, too true. "Okay," she said slowly, "but I pick the pieces, I price them, and if anyone asks, you tell them I earned this commission. Not that you gave it to me." Deal. The commission paid $15,000, more money than Claire had seen since Derek stole her inheritance. She put half in savings, used the other half to buy more art supplies, better paints, bigger canvases, space to create without fear. Georgia started sitting up, then crawling, then pulling herself up on furniture, growing, changing, becoming herself without a father's influence, just her mother and grandmother, an honorary aunt and uncle, a village, a family built by choice instead of blood. Stephanie called one day, asked to meet for coffee. Claire almost said no, but something made her agree. They met at a cafe downtown. Awkward at first. "What do you say to your husband's mistress?" What common ground exists between a wife and the other woman? But they found it in shared experience, in parallel trauma, in the understanding that comes from surviving the same predator. "Is this weird?" Stephanie asked. "Me calling?" "Little bit," Claire admitted. "I wanted to thank you for pressing charges, for not backing down. The DA added my case to yours. Derek got 12 years. He's appealing, but his attorney says it won't work. He stole from both of us. And that pattern, that's damning. I'm glad it helped." "I'm in therapy now," Stephanie continued, "dealing with how I ignored red flags, how I wanted the story to be true so badly I didn't fact check. I'm working on it." Pause. "Were there signs with you? Did you see them and ignore them too?" Claire was quiet for a moment, honest self-reflection, not self-blame. There was a difference, Ruin. Yes, the way he talked about his exes, how it was always their fault, never his. The way he diminished my work. Small comments, not abuse, just erosion. Over time, until I was smaller, quieter, easier to rob. "I'm sorry he did that to you." To both of us. I'm sorry too, but Stephanie, we got out. We survived. That's not nothing. That's everything. They weren't friends. Might never be. But they were something. Sister survivors, connected by shared trauma and separate healing. Women supporting women. No longer competing for the attention of a narcissistic abuser, just supporting each other's journey forward. Derek's criminal trial was set for the following spring. Claire didn't plan to attend, didn't need to. Vivian would be there. Stephanie would testify. The evidence would speak for itself. Claire's job was to move forward, to build, to create, to show her daughter what strength looked like. Ruth babysat while Claire worked and worked and worked, creating art that told her story without words. Pain and betrayal and survival, rendered in bold strokes and brave colors. A local gallery noticed, asked to feature her work. A small show, nothing major, but her paintings on white walls, her name on the placard. People actually looking at her work, actually buying it. The opening was on a Saturday night. Claire wore a black dress, not maternity clothes, not the frumpy comfort clothes from the Derek days. Something that fit, something that made her feel powerful. Georgia stayed with Ruth. Vivian came. Marcus came too. With a date, a nice woman, appropriate, a doctor, intelligent, kind. Not Claire. And that was okay. Better than okay. It was right. He caught Claire's eye across the gallery, nodded. She nodded back. They didn't need more than that. The friendship they'd built was enough. More than enough. Stephanie showed up. Awkward but brave. I saw the announcement online. Oh, I hope it's okay I came. It's okay, Claire said, and meant it. They stood side by side, looking at a painting. Reds and blacks and gold. Angry, triumphant. The kind of beauty that comes from surviving ugly things. This one's my favorite, Stephanie said. Mine too. It's called The Women Who Refuse to Disappear. Perfect. Vivian brought champagne, sparkling cider for Claire, who was still nursing. To surviving, to thriving, to never trembling in banks again. They toasted, 3 women, connected by one terrible man, freed by their own courage, building lives defined by strength instead of trauma. The gallery sold 6 paintings that night, $12,000, Claire's money, earned by her talent, her work, her refusal to stay small. She went home to her apartment, her daughter, her life, not perfect, not easy, but hers. Finally, completely, undeniably hers. 1 year after the divorce, Claire's life looked nothing like she'd imagined, but it looked exactly like she'd needed. Georgia was walking now, talking, saying mama and nana and Uncle Mars, which was as close as she could get to Uncle Marcus. She was happy, thriving, growing up in a house full of women who showed her what strength looked like. Claire's art career had taken off in ways she hadn't expected. 3 more gallery shows, a feature in a local art magazine, commissions from people who wanted pieces that told stories. That felt real instead of decorative. The financial independence felt better than any relationship ever had. Knowing she could support herself, support her daughter, not need anyone's permission or approval or financial backing, just her talent and her work ethic and her refusal to quit. Derek's trial had ended 6 months ago, guilty on all counts: wire fraud, identity theft, forgery, money laundering. 12 years in prison. He'd be 50 when he got out. Georgia would be 13. Old enough to decide for herself if she wanted contact. Old enough to understand what had happened. Old enough to see clearly. Claire didn't think about him much anymore. He'd become what he should have always been. Irrelevant. A footnote in her story. Not the main character. Not even a supporting role. Just a cautionary tale about choosing poorly and surviving anyway. Stephanie had moved to Portland. Started over too. They texted occasionally, not often, just enough to check in, to remind each other they'd survived, that they were still standing. Ruth had retired fully, spent her days with Georgia, teaching her to bake, to garden, to be strong and kind in equal measure. 4 generations of women, each one teaching the next how to survive difficult men and thrive anyway. Marcus had gotten serious with his girlfriend, the doctor. Claire had met her a few times, liked her. She was good for him, grounded, real, not interested in his money, just him, the man he'd become, the man he'd always been underneath the billions. They had dinner sometimes. Claire, Marcus, his girlfriend, and whoever Claire happened to be seeing. Not dating seriously, not ready for that, but dipping her toes back in, learning to trust again, slowly, carefully. On George's first birthday, they threw a party at Ruth's house, nothing fancy. Cupcakes and balloons and people who genuinely loved her daughter. Not performing, not pretending, just celebrating. Georgia smashed her cupcake, got frosting everywhere. Laughed that belly laugh that babies do. Pure joy, untainted by adult complications. Claire watched her daughter, saw her own mother watching too. 3 generations in one moment. Past, present, future. All the women who'd survived, who'd built strength from broken things. You did good, baby, Ruth said softly. Real good. We did good, Claire corrected. I couldn't have done this alone. No, but you did the hardest part. You left. You fought. You chose strength over comfort. That's all you. I'm just backup. That night, after everyone left, after Georgia was asleep, Claire stood in the doorway watching her daughter. 1-year-old, walking, talking, thriving. Mama paint? Georgia had asked earlier, her favorite phrase, because she'd grown up watching her mother create, watching her mother build a career from talent and determination. Claire thought about what she'd teach her daughter, the lessons she'd learned the hard way, the wisdom earned through pain and survival. She'd teach her that choosing wrong doesn't make you stupid, it makes you human, and humans get second chances. She'd teach her that financial independence matters, that having your own money, your own career, your own identity separate from any relationship was the truest form of freedom. She'd teach her about narcissistic abuse, about the red flags she'd ignored, about the patterns she'd excused. So Georgia would recognize them early. So Georgia would run. She'd teach her that sometimes the man who promises you the world is just a good salesman. And sometimes the man who asks you to wait is worth waiting for. But mostly she'd teach her that she didn't need any man at all, that she could build her own world, her own dreams, her own strength. She'd teach her about women supporting women, about mothers and daughters and friends who don't give up, about the village it takes to raise a child, about the village it takes to rebuild a life. She'd teach her that trembling doesn't mean weak, that fear doesn't mean failure, that the moments when you're most afraid are often the moments when you're most brave. She'd teach her that the best revenge isn't success, it's peace, and Claire finally had both. 2 years after the bank, 2 years after Marcus walked back into her life, 2 years after everything fell apart and came back together in a completely different shape. Claire's second solo show opened at a gallery in downtown Seattle, not the small local place. A real gallery, the kind that art critics attended, the kind that launched careers. The show was called Trembling, 15 paintings, all telling parts of her story. Not literally, not obvious, but emotional truth rendered in color and shape and raw honesty. The centerpiece was called The Women Who Refused to Disappear. 8 feet tall, 5 feet wide, reds and blacks and golds, angry and beautiful, destroyed and rebuilt. Every woman who'd ever been diminished, every woman who'd ever been erased, every woman who'd ever fought her way back from nothing. It sold before the show even opened, $25,000, to a collector in New York who said it was the most powerful piece she'd seen in a decade. Georgia was there, 2 years old now, wearing a little black dress that matched her mother's, holding Ruth's hand, saying hello to everyone who bent down to her level. Charming, confident, completely unaware that her existence was the real art, the real masterpiece. Vivian came. Power suit, red this time, victory color. She brought her girlfriend, another lawyer. They made a terrifying couple, the kind who could destroy you in court and look fabulous doing it. Marcus came with his fiancée, the doctor. They were getting married in the spring. Claire was invited, genuinely happy for them, and the past was past, the present was better. Stephanie came too, drove up from Portland. She'd started her own real estate company, ethical practices, transparent dealings, everything Derek hadn't been. She was rebuilding too, slower than Claire, but steady, moving forward. The gallery was packed, people looking at Claire's work, seeing her story, connecting with it. More than one woman had tears in her eyes looking at Trembling. More than one woman pulled Claire aside to thank her, to tell her their own story, to say they'd survived too. This was what art was supposed to do. Not decorate, connect, make people feel less alone in their pain, make people see their strength reflected back. Derek had been released early, good behavior, served 7 years instead of 12. Claire had heard through Vivian. He'd tried to contact her. Letters, emails, blocked, all of them. She'd moved on. He didn't get to come back. Georgia would decide for herself someday, when she was old enough, when she could understand. Claire would tell her the truth, all of it, and let Georgia choose. But not yet. Not for a long time. Tonight was about celebration, about how far they had come, about the life Claire had built from the ruins of her worst day. She found Ruth standing in front of the women who refused to disappear. Her mother had tears streaming down her face. "Mom, I'm just so proud of you, baby. You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and made it beautiful, made it meaningful, made it matter. I learned that from you. You survived Dad leaving, raised me alone, showed me what strength looked like. And you're showing her," Ruth nodded toward Georgia, "breaking the cycle, teaching her she doesn't need to shrink, doesn't need to disappear, can take up space and be loud and messy and still be worthy of love." Claire pulled her mother into a hug, felt Georgia wrap her little arms around both their legs. 3 generations. All survivors, all thrivers, all refusing to disappear. Later, after the gallery closed, after Georgia fell asleep in her car seat, after Ruth drove them home, Claire stood in her apartment doorway, watching her daughter sleep, the same way she had 1,000 times before. But tonight felt different, final, like the last chapter of a long story, like the beginning of a new one. She thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago, trembling in a bank, pregnant and broke and terrified, facing the complete destruction of everything she'd believed about her life. She thought about the choices that had led her there, choosing Derek over Marcus, choosing present over future, choosing charm over character. Bad choices, painful choices, but not defining choices, just choices. She thought about Marcus walking through those bank doors, seeing her, choosing to help. Not because he wanted her back, not because he was a savior, just because it was the right thing to do. Because he remembered who she'd been before Derek and wanted to help her find herself again. She thought about Vivian, friend from college who'd never given up, who'd been waiting to help, who'd destroyed Derek in court with precision and no mercy. She thought about Ruth, mother who kept her room ready, who sang old songs and made tea and provided the steady, unconditional love that had held Claire together when everything else fell apart. She thought about Stephanie, unlikely ally, sister survivor, woman who'd been lied to the same way, who'd chosen to testify, to fight, to refuse to disappear. She thought about Georgia, her daughter, her purpose, her reason for fighting, growing up with women who showed her strength, who taught her worth, who refused to let one terrible man define them. And she thought about herself, the woman she'd become, not despite the trauma, not in spite of Derek, just because of her own choices after the worst day, her own decision to fight, to survive, to build something beautiful from the wreckage. Georgia stirred in her sleep, made that little sound she made, that contented sigh, safe, loved, protected. Claire thought about what she'd tell her daughter someday, when Georgia was old enough to understand, old enough to hear the whole story. She'd tell her about the bank, about trembling, about feeling powerless and afraid and completely alone. She'd tell her about Marcus walking in, about help arriving from unexpected places, about accepting that help without shame. She'd tell her about fighting back, about pressing charges, about refusing to be a victim, about choosing strength even when it would have been easier to give up. She'd tell her about art, about finding herself again through creation, about building a career, about financial independence and the freedom it brings. She'd tell her about women supporting women, about her grandmother and Aunt Vivian, and even Stephanie, about the village that raised her, about the strength found in community. But mostly she'd tell her this: your worst day doesn't define you, it's just your turning point. The moment when you choose who you're going to become. Victim or survivor, small or strong, disappeared or refusing to disappear. I chose strength, I chose survival, I chose to refuse to disappear, and that choice changed everything. Not because a billionaire ex-boyfriend walked back into my life, not because I had a good lawyer or a strong mother or loyal friends. Those things helped, but they weren't the reason. The reason was me, my choice, my refusal to stay down, my decision that I was worth fighting for, that you were worth fighting for, that we deserve better than trembling in banks and smirking husbands and lives defined by someone else's cruelty. That's your inheritance, Georgia. Not money, not a father's name. Strength. The kind that gets tested and doesn't break. The kind that builds something beautiful from broken things. The kind that refuses to disappear no matter how much someone tries to erase you. Claire stood there for a long time, watching her daughter sleep, feeling the peace that had been so hard won, the success that had come from refusing to quit, the life she'd built with her own hands and heart and stubborn refusal to stay broken. She thought about Derek, about where he was now, released from prison, starting over, building a new life. She hoped he'd learned something, hoped he'd changed, but she didn't need to know, didn't need closure from him. She'd found closure in herself. She thought about Marcus, about the friendship they'd built, the respect, the mutual support without expectation or obligation. He'd helped her find herself again, reminded her who she'd been before Derek, before the erosion and diminishment and slow disappearing. That gift was more valuable than any financial support he had provided. She thought about her art hanging in galleries, in homes, in offices, her story touching other people's stories, making women feel less alone, making women feel seen, making women feel strong. That mattered more than any amount of money she'd lost to Derek's theft. She thought about Georgia growing up in a house full of strong women, learning to take up space, learning to trust her instincts, learning to recognize red flags, learning to leave when leaving was the answer, learning to fight when fighting was the answer, learning to be herself without apology or diminishment. That was the legacy that mattered. Not money, not a father's name, not a husband's promises. Just strength, just truth, just the refusal to disappear. Claire walked over to Georgia's crib, kissed her sleeping daughter's forehead, breathed in that baby smell that was already fading. That sweet, innocent smell of someone who hadn't yet been hurt by the world. "Sweet dreams, baby girl," Claire whispered. "Tomorrow we paint. Together we make art and mess and noise and take up all the space we want, because that's who we are. The women who refuse to disappear." She turned off the light, left the door cracked, walked to her own room, her apartment, her life, built from ruins, stronger for the breaking, beautiful because of the scars. Before bed, she checked her phone one last time. Email from the gallery, 3 more paintings sold, another commission request, an inquiry from a gallery in San Francisco about a show next year. Text from Vivian, "You were magnificent tonight. Proud doesn't cover it." Text from Ruth, "That's my girl. That's my strong, beautiful, talented girl. Love you." Text from Marcus, "Congratulations, Claire. You did it. You really did it. Not just survived, thrived." And a text from Stephanie, "Thank you for showing me what's possible on the other side of trauma, for being brave first so I could be brave too." Claire put down her phone, lay in bed, listened to the city outside her window, the life she'd built, the peace she'd found. She thought about titles, about the story people would tell about her someday, about what Georgia would say when people asked about her mother. Not the woman whose husband betrayed her, not the victim of narcissistic abuse, not the pregnant wife who trembled in banks, but The artist, the survivor, the woman who refused to disappear, the mother who taught her daughter that strength comes from surviving impossible things with grace and courage and stubborn refusal to quit. That was the story. That was the truth. That was the inheritance that mattered. Claire closed her eyes, smiled, fell asleep with the confidence of a woman who'd faced her worst and come out whole, scarred but stronger, wiser but not bitter, free. The best revenge isn't success, it's peace, and Claire Brennan had both.